When I was 22, I did one thing with my money, the most boring thing possible. I had no idea that by 34, that would mean I would never have to save for retirement again. This video is about what that actually means and what I'm going to do with it. All right, so I am a 34-year-old full-time working mom with a corporate job. I have a husband, 2 toddlers at home, a very expensive mortgage. I don't consider myself rich by any means, but my degree was in engineering and I went into IT after college. So I am a high earner making 6 figures. When I was interning back in college, while we were onboarding to the company, one of the things that we were told was to take advantage of the company's 5% 401k match. They walked us through how to set that up, how to make sure that we were getting that full match amount. We had to put in 5% ourselves in order to get the full 5% match from the company. So I set that up when I was an intern, and I've kept that going ever since. Now I have switched jobs. I've rolled over that first 401k into another 401k with my new corporate job, and I'm still contributing that 5% to get that full 5% match from this other company. And that's it. I just did the minimum. I didn't do any extra. I didn't take advantage of the full limit for what you can put in your 401k. I didn't optimize anything. I was just taking advantage to make sure that I got that full match because that's a benefit that the company was giving you. It was basically free money, part of your job. And with compounding, that has built up over time. It really starts fairly slowly, and then it starts to grow faster as you start really building up that 401k account. So that brings me to CoastFi. I didn't exactly know that that was a thing and was introduced to CoastFi while I was scrolling Instagram, and it got me curious. CoastFi basically means that your retirement savings is already large enough that you would not have to invest another dollar and you would still be okay for retirement. It's basically you've invested these contributions up to a certain point, and if you took your foot off the gas completely, it would continue growing and you would have enough to retire. You've basically front loaded the work and then your money works for you. It basically just needs time. Now, to know how much is enough, there are calculators that can show what your investment from today's point is and what it will be when you hit, let's say, 62, just based on the average rate of return, if you didn't add any more contributions. Now, of that amount, there's this 4% rule. It's basically of that saved up amount in your 401k, you can withdraw 4% every year sustainably. For my numbers, I have about 270k in my 401k, and actually so does my husband. So we have about 540k in our 401ks. If we assume somewhere between a 5 and 7% return, if you think it's going to go better, you could look at 8 and 9 as well. But if we assume, let's say, a 7% return, 6% return, we will have somewhere between $1.3 and $2 million in today's purchasing power. So probably more like $3 million when you count into inflation. If you want to run your own numbers, I put together a CoastFi worksheet in Google Sheets. You can copy, save it to your own Google account. You can put in your numbers, save it, update it later, and come back again. That is free and linked in the description below. Using the 4% rule, my income monthly would be around 4 to 6.5K a month, or from my 401k. And that's without ever touching the principal. So that's it. That's if we never contributed another cent. Now I'll go into that in a minute in our decisions around what we're going to do next, but let's revisit how I even got here. As I said before, I just took advantage of my company's 401k match. I invested straight from my paycheck before it ever hit my bank account. I told the company to take out 5% of my income and put it in the 401k. And the company matched that with another 5%. So you're talking 10% of my income, basically, but I only put in 5, went into a 401k about when I was 22 years old. That's it. No Roth conversions, no extra Roth backdoor investment strategy, no spreadsheets, no trading. I basically forgot about it, let it ride. And as my salary grew, the amount I was investing grew. Now, if I was smarter, I would have said, as my salary grew, I invested a little bit more. I didn't do that. That's why I like to think it's almost like accidental that I have what I have, because there was actually very little thought put behind it. And my husband basically did the same. So the math now says we have over $500,000 in our account at 34, and we can basically be done with that chapter. So now, armed with that knowledge of where we're at, truly at, we have a couple options. We could go down the route of chasing FIRE. And FIRE basically means financial independence, retire early. So that basically means you have enough saved up in investments that you can retire early and just pull from that investment to pay for your lifestyle. While that is technically achievable, the kind of rule out there is 25 times your expenses that you need to retire. But that is not what I want. I'm not interested in extreme savings rates or early retirement in the traditional sense. And my husband is going to keep working. He has really good benefits. And if he continues working until he can hit the minimum retirement age, we get to keep things like our health insurance. So as much as maybe some days he would like to quit, he's going to continue working. However, I want something different. I want the ability to step back from full-time corporate work and be home with my kids more. I want to homeschool, not because I'm scared of public schools, but because I just really love learning, and I would find a lot of enjoyment and value and purpose being able to experience my kids learning and discovering and growing. And I want to be part of that journey. And I also want to run some kind of small side business that I actually enjoy, that brings me purpose and meaning and connection, and allows me to express my creativity. And that's not necessarily FIRE. One spouse still working, another spouse wanting to be a maybe part-time stay-at-home mom. However, we're also not ready for that financially. So that brings me to our next step of, if that's the life that we want now, we no longer really have to worry about retirement, but we do have to worry about, up until age 62, we need to be able to cover our costs and our expenses without my income. And that means cash flow. And for that, I'm working on 3 things together. One, I'm building a buffer, having a savings emergency fund and some invested capital to have a safety net, and possibly withdraw some monthly earnings from those investment accounts without touching, of course, a retirement account. Second, we are reducing our monthly expenses. We're taking a good hard look at our lifestyle and seeing where we can actually reduce our lifestyle in meaningful ways from an excess of spending that's not really benefiting us. And third, I'm trying to build a side income stream for something that I would want to do anyway, the creative business as well as content creation. Trying them both. None of these things alone get me there, but all 3 together do. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I have made so many mistakes along the way. I have gotten into way too much credit card debt, to the point where I actually did a loan consolidation to repay that and get out from under those high interest rates. We bought a more expensive house than we needed, and the lifestyle creep was real. I'm not pretending I did any of this perfectly, and I'll cover some of those mistakes in future videos because that is a whole other discussion. But even with those financial mistakes, just using corporate 5% matching and the 401ks available through work, we set that up so that we didn't have to think about it, and it grew And so despite the financial mistakes that I've made, we are still in a really good place. Now, I know that we are blessed with our current incomes working in the tech sector, but this strategy works even if it's less, even if you don't have $500,000 at 34. If your living expenses are less, you need less. So that's our next chapter. So I invite you to take a look at your own retirement savings at this point and run a COSFI calculator. Look at your current balance, your expected retirement age, the assumed growth rate, somewhere between 5 and 9, and the calculator that I created and linked down below, completely free, allows you to input those numbers and it'll show you what the projected balance will be at those different rate of returns so that you can see a range. If the market doesn't do great, you probably have this much. If the market does above the historical average, then you could have up to this much. And then with the 4% rule, how much that actually means in monthly income. You might be further along than you actually think, like I found out. And if you're not, you're probably not as far as you fear. If this made you curious about what my plan actually looks like, I have a video on reducing my expenses without moving. I'll link it next.